Kilsalem's take on the Cowichan land title ruling. He is the former chair of the Squamish Nation. Tonight we are hearing from Thomas Isaac. He is one of the top legal minds when it comes to Aboriginal title and was also the BC government's lead treaty negotiator in the 1990s. I sat down with him this past week. Let's start with this government and where we're going. Do we know what the agenda is here?
This has been really the big question in British Columbia, and I think to be fair, I wouldn't single out this government. This has been an issue for successive governments in British Columbia that there has not been an apparent game plan. The closest I think British Columbia has come to a game plan was the focus on treaties, constitutionally protected treaties that would set out the rules of engagement when dealing with constitutionally protected Aboriginal and treaty rights. But no, the province has not had an apparent game plan on how all of this, that is the reconciliation process, is going to work. And it's absolutely essential if we're serious about reconciliation.
This government has been criticized for speaking out of all sides of its mouth, saying one thing to property owners, another thing to First Nations, another thing to municipal governments, for example. Is that your interpretation, that they're trying to appease all sides here and, in effect, not really moving forward?
Look, yeah, I think the observation I would make is I think that is accurate. And it can't be done on this issue. This issue requires very, very prudent, thoughtful, serious public government leadership. I've been saying it for decades, and the Supreme Court of Canada has been saying it for decades, that these issues land on the desk of public government ultimately.
Why is there such a paralysis then to be the one to get this moving?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not a politician. I do see the consequences every day of the uncertainty. And it's not just the consequences for industry and business. It's not just the consequences for private landowners, but it's also the consequences for other Indigenous people. There are First Nations and Métis in this province that are also being left behind. We need a radical rethink of what we've been doing in the province for decades, and thinking about where is it that we're going, how are we going to get there, and will it be fair? And at the end of the day, ultimately, will we have an economy that all, whether you're Indigenous or non-Indigenous, can benefit from, and we have a standard of living that we can be proud of?
Since the Cowichan ruling, there has been a big effort by the province to take the temperature down. And while Premier Eby has said he's concerned about the implications of the ruling, he's also tried to quell fears that this will be a blow for fee simple property. But you've had a really close look at the ruling. What's your interpretation of what it actually means?
Look, I think it's good that we're trying to keep temperatures down. But I don't want that to be misinterpreted to suggest in any way that this is not an extremely serious issue that needs immediate attention by our public governments and our courts. I think when I look at the decision, the court in 6 separate paragraphs makes it very clear that the core elements of indefeasible title do not apply in cases of proven Aboriginal title. Now, I've heard a lot of people say, well, look, the First Nation's not coming after the land. The judge didn't invalidate the titles. That is true, but it's missing the point. That isn't the point. The point is the statements of the court in at least 6 different paragraphs where the court expressly states that the Land Title Act, the core provisions of indefeasible title, do not apply in the case of Aboriginal title. The challenge with that is that leaves British Columbia, so far as I am aware, as the only Western economy on the planet where you can't take indefeasible title to the bank. That in fact, your indefeasible title is now defeasible. This obviously needs to be corrected unless we are prepared for some form of new way to hold title. in British Columbia, and of course that's a much bigger issue.
So what you're saying is the fears of the property owners in Richmond and elsewhere and investors are valid.
Completely valid. And again, that doesn't mean that the sky is falling today. There's a lot of talk about fear mongering in that, and I think we should try to stay from fear mongering on both sides. But we also have to be accurate and tell the truth about what's in the decision. It's not helpful to reconciliation. It's not helpful to the discussion to avoid what the decision actually says. And the decision is, a direct statement on eroding indefeasible title in British Columbia.
And that's key. It's not just a decision that relates to these parcels of land in Richmond, is it? The judge makes that clear.
Well, that's right. So I was on a program earlier today where somebody was talking about, well, this is just about the 800 acres. Again, with respect, that's not accurate. There are two elements to the decision. One is about the 800 acres where title is declared. And I want to be very clear. That's a very serious situation for those folks that are holding land, whether you're industrial, whether you're a homeowner. It's the same title. This business of trying to separate homeowners from businesses doesn't fly in terms of indefeasible title. There's a second element to the decision. The judge is very clear in the case and says it's a precedent. These are the judge's words. A precedent that will flow from this case is that sections 23 and 25 of the Land Title Act do not apply to Aboriginal title. Those are not my words. Those are the judge's words, paragraph 3551. That's there in black and white. So anyone suggesting this is about 800 acres, it's simply not the full story on the decision. It's not open for argument.
You say immediate action intervention is needed. What would that look like?
Well, I think there's a few things. I would like to see the province come out with a public declaration of support for its land title regime. It can also declare publicly its support for reconciliation with Indigenous peoples in this province. We should be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. But we need a definitive statement, first and foremost, from our provincial government that it's going to defend vigorously the land title regime. And that should be in writing, where the world can see it.
Has the government been universal in its approach here? We've had the Haida issue. Now we have the Richmond issue. Have they enforced clear arguments across the board, or have they taken a different approach in one area and a different approach in another?
We don't have enough time to go through the dozens of agreements that I've reviewed. I would call it a flip-flop, flip-flop, flip. Depending on the First Nation, and those First Nations that don't have their agreements will know what I'm talking about. Depending on the First Nation, depending on the part of the province, depending on the pressure on the provincial government, we will get whatever agreement can be done at that particular time. That is not a recipe for reconciliation. Ultimately, that's not a criticism of any one particular First Nation. You won't hear me criticizing them. The focus squarely lands back on our public governments, and in this case, the provincial government. We need a game plan. It needs to be consistent. It needs to be thoughtful and prudent.
And where has this government been when it comes to consultation?
Well, I think consultation with First Nations, actually, British Columbia, I think it's fair to say, does a fairly robust job of that, and in some cases maybe isn't making decisions in a timely enough manner. In terms of consultation with the public, I think the evidence is that it's abysmal. I remember back in the early days when I was chief treaty negotiator in the 90s, a big part of that job was actually public education. I had the Lower Mainland files in the late 90s, and I would say I spent at least 50% of my time with local governments in the Lower Mainland talking about the Constitution, trying to explain why reconciliation can be a good thing for the economy of British Columbia. But we need to get back to, and that was under, I believe that was an NDP regime, that was Glenn Clark's government. We need to get back to transparency. Reconciliation is very, very serious business, and the honor of the Crown demands transparency. I think the public interest demands transparency. I think the government needs to be doing everything it can do to move this away from us them. That means coming out with a strong statement in support of fee simple title. That is not offensive to the objectives of reconciliation. It can't be. And so I think we need to move to a place that isn't us, them. And I'm hearing more and more of the us, them dialogue. And that does concern me. But you don't just land in a place by happen chance. This has been building for years. Those of us working in this area have known that a day will come when the public will become more engaged and wonder what is actually going on in the province. And so, in some ways, this is not surprising, but we do need to stay calm and carry on at this point and focus on the next steps in the appeal and really hope that we get some very, very firm leadership from our provincial and federal governments.
Any way you slice this, it's not an issue that is going to increase political popularity, is it? Is that maybe why they don't want to touch it?
That may be. Again, I'm not a political advisor. I do worry that this issue has been used, and again, by successive governments.
Yeah.
Not picking on one as a bit of a political football and a political, win and loss type situation. This issue demands much more than that. This genie does not go back in the bottle. The honor of the crown demands transparency for all. And the issue of reconciliation is too important to be treating as a political issue. I think that's got to be inherently tough if you're in the political world. I'm not, but I have to. You ask me a question, and it should not be used for political purposes.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you doing this.
Oh, it's my pleasure.